Hi, folks. You're with Tasteless today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the issue of values. Now, it gets bandied around a lot. For example, I saw a recent video, some Pakistani dude, I think, was going on the streets in London and randomly asking, I don't think it was that random actually, but randomly asking people, what are British values and or English values, and no one seemed to know. And so he said, well, that's it, it's sorted out. There's all this talk about our values, and in Britain it's all nonsense because nobody knows what they are, and if they do exist, no one can explain them or define them. Okay, all right then. Now, at the same time, you see political rhetoric where we let millions of illegal aliens, we should let millions of illegal aliens come into the West because they're all human beings, and it represents our values to let these people come in by the gazillion. And so what does that even fucking mean? Well, nobody knows, and there's no definition of values or explanation of it. Politicians are always talking about it. It doesn't represent our values, has no place in our society, no place, they say, and they hoo into the microphone or into the camera. But what are these values? Now, I guess there's a couple of things to consider here. Firstly, is civics is taught very sparingly in political civics and science, taught very sparingly in Western nations today, and has been for some time. Talking to even people sort of under the age of 40, they didn't really have civics, not that they recall, in class, whether it be in like social studies or history or something like that. They didn't really, even in ethics classes that exist, they seem to not want to teach civics. They're more concerned with talking about LGBTQ stuff and so on. So now civics is where I first sort of learned, not that it was called values at the time, it was just a civics class, but where values were, you can understand what were values and what not. And this also, a study of history will give you that as well. An objective study of history, that is, not some politicized, 1690 project, critical race theory nonsense. That's you won't learn anything worthwhile from that. But to understand values, you have to understand honesty and truth. You can't really go to values unless you at least have that first. And within honesty and truth is reality. And so these are really the founding principles of the values, or your ability to understand and appreciate values. So as a kid, there was civics class certainly when I was at school. It's not like I'm a million years old. My education ended 37 years ago or something like that. So it's not like it was a gazillion years ago, but it might as well be, given the difference in the education system today. So civics was part of what is the Constitution, how does it work. We also were taught in Australia about the US Constitution, the founding principles. We learned about James Madison and George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin. Like, I knew all that sort of stuff from even early high school. And we touched on civics in even primary school. This is the cabinet, that's the prime minister. This is the House of Review, and this is the legislature, and this is the separate judiciary, and all these. We were taught all those sorts of things. And again, not that it was pointedly pushed as a value, it was sort of, this is how things are. We're also taught how these things did not exist in other countries or other places. Why are countries dirt poor and why are countries rich? A well-ordered society with a government that represents the people is far more likely to be rich than one that has no independent rule of law, no due legal progress, no democratic participation, no protection of private property. So we were taught that. So these things are values, and again, not that we were taught that's how it is, and other places don't do these things. So by extension, they therefore these things become values. As an adult, I didn't really think about it a whole lot, but as in just look, well, that's how things are. But I didn't realize it until I started traveling on business. Now, again, as I think I've mentioned a few times, it was sort of quite by accident. I started business traveling at a young age. The company I worked for, they wanted someone to pound the pavements and pound the beat in Silicon Valley in the United States, just to discover what the new technologies of the world were going to be, as in computer technologies, that sort of stuff. And so it looked like hard work, and I spoke some Spanish, and so they said, okay, well, hey, Billy Bob, you can go. And they sent me cattle class, had me staying in shitty cheap hotels, but nonetheless it was quite an experience going around and talking to going around the light industrial estates, knocking on doors and saying, hey, what are you guys doing? And they were the guy, because of my weird accent and everything, they were quite happy to tell, oh, we're doing this, and all these people I was talking to were inventing tomorrow. They're inventing the future of technology, and thus the future of a whole lot of things that today we take for granted. I was talking to the people, the original inventors of the personal computer PC network, for example. Not that I knew it at the time that was the very beginning of the total revolution of distributed desktop computer processing and things like that. Nonetheless, so I was doing a lot of traveling, and that went on, and so I was able to go to lots of different countries, and as I became more senior, I was then tasked with having to negotiate legal agreements and contracts to do with manufacturing and distribution and a whole lot of things. And so I needed to deal with different places, different cultures, different legal systems, different attitudes to what an agreement was, and also different attitudes to truth telling. Now, I had a very pragmatic position in as much as every contract I negotiated or was instructed to put together. I mean, it wasn't necessarily a negotiation every time, but I was there to dot the I's and cross the T's. The idea was that I didn't want to have to come back every 5 minutes to do maintenance on the agreement. So I wanted an agreement that wouldn't automatically lead to, or would be likely to lead to, disputation or misunderstanding or anything like that. So accuracy in the information, clarity, and truth telling were pretty important to that. Because if the agreement wasn't working, or there was somehow dysfunction, was percolating to the surface, I would have to come back, and I would have to deal with angry, irritated, or annoyed, or people that felt that in some way their interests hadn't been fully reflected in the agreement. Things like that. So I'd rather spend more time in that. But what I learned in that was how very different the attitudes of people were in different countries. Now, understandably so. For example, in the West, the rule of law, due legal process, independent courts, they're very, were then. The globalists have nearly destroyed all that now, but they were then very much part of the fabric of our society. You could say they're values. They are a value, a belief in those things. So values are beliefs in institutions, whether they be social or in the case, say, law courts or independent law courts, belief in the laws, belief in the parliament that passes laws. These become values, or can be seen as values, and indeed in many cases are values. But you go to another country, another place where they don't have independent courts, and the idea of an independent court, like a non-corrupt court, is laughable. The mere mention of an independent court with a judge that would decide based on the facts will get the whole room will degenerate into laughing. They'll just laugh at you, and you're so naive, you idiot. Because they don't have those things in certain countries. Also, the idea that you would come to the table honestly with the idea of crafting an agreement, as in, again, manufacturing, product distribution, whatever it might be, that you would craft an agreement that's meant to stand up and last for a while, where everybody, the idea I had was, unless the people perceive that they are benefiting from the arrangement, then they will constantly want to come back and revisit the agreement to modify it. And that meant that I would have to come back and be constantly doing petty day-to-day maintenance on things, which again would raise temperatures and increase anxieties, and I didn't want that. So, but they couldn't perceive that, these people. Well, your job as representative of your side of things is to screw us. Your job is to steal from us and to screw us and to fuck us over. Like, we know that's what you're trying to do. We know that's your job, and the reason we know that is because we're trying to do it to you. So it's whoever is the best at screwing the other over is going to win this. And there's two people that agree, but it's only one winner. Only one winner. Two go in, but one comes out. And I was intrigued at how many places, China and I mean, the list goes on, thought that way and believed and would fight to the death to hold on to that view. And I would try and explain to them, look, I don't want to have to keep on coming back here. I want this agreement, and therefore we need to be, give each other accurate information, and we need to be open with each other, because that's the only way we're going to craft an agreement that we both will be happy with. And they would just look at me with this sort of sneering look on their face of, well, that's your bullshit line to just deceive us. You're trying to lull us into a false sense of security so you can fuck us over, you damn fucking white boy. And it was that, and it takes a long time to overcome that type of thing. So when we talk about values, we talk about the values of social trust and the values of honesty when it comes to things like this, crafting an agreement and putting it together, and to try and let's do something that works, and so on and so forth. Now, these are values, and I discovered these are very much Western values. Social trust is not widespread, nor is there trust based on facts. So I could go into the business arrangement or trying to say, well, these are the facts. So if we stick to the facts, then we will be able, by extension, we'll be able to produce an agreement and thus an outcome that works for everybody. But they were, no, where you're cheating me. You're cheating me somehow. I can't see how you're cheating me, but I know you are. And again, they just couldn't get out of that. And the reason is because they were trying to cheat me, and so to cheat the company I represented. So these were values. So the West has certain values in, social trust, the honesty, trust in institutions, that we can create a contract as an agreement to do business. We can create a contract that covers the base, is accurate, where everyone makes a buck and is happy, and that's it. They couldn't sell. I had a hard time outside of the West, or say upper middle range economies. They weren't too bad, but I found that in Eastern Europeans, Russians, pretty much anywhere else in the world outside of first world countries, and wealth obviously must have something to do with it, that they didn't share these values or have them. They saw no benefit in independent courts of law, because if you want an outcome that favors you, you just bribe the judge. Hey, no problem. And so the idea of an independent court of law that would act on the facts was something that not only did they not have it in those places, they saw no value in it. They could see no wider value in it. So, when I try and explain, so we'd be out for dinner after the haggling and the pushing and the shoving, we're out for dinner or having a lunch, and I try and explain to it in sort of less, outside of the office, if you like, in less intimidating circumstances. If you agree to these things, then, as in the social values of trust and the contract, and if you agree to those things, then things will move a lot quicker. I can, and I tried to explain. Look, I can do that in a first world country. I can knock out a contract like this in a few hours. I've been here nearly a week, and we're still haggling over things that are largely irrelevant to the main game. Do you understand how much more of an overhead this creates in the business discussions? How it creates a a level of distrust that shouldn't exist and doesn't need to exist, and provide, and is no benefit to either one of us, that this lack of trust exists. But they again would see that as a ruse. No, you're just saying that to try and lull me. You're just saying that as a layer of deception. You're just a crafty deceiver, and we're onto that because we're trying to deceive you. And therefore, so they don't see these things as values. So values belief in one's institutions, trust in one's government, trust in the courts, and belief in the courts, independent rule of law and due legal process. All of these things are values, and values of organizational structure, and the idea of trying to gain efficiency, the idea of merit, rather than just putting your family or your buddies in cozy jobs. All these sorts of things. Contracts being won by open tender rather than cronyism. All these things are Western values. Now, on the other side of it, I'm talking to quite a wealthy Chinese guy. We're driving along in the car, and he's come to Australia, by the way. We're driving along in the car, and he just drops it out. He says, the West is only rich because it stole everything from my country's poor, because the West stole all our money, and that's why the West is rich. It stole everything. Now, you try and explain things like the spinning jenny, the inventions, all the technical inventions that the West has been responsible for, whether it be the spinning jenny or the steam engine or the light bulb or the, whatever, electricity. The list just goes on and on and on and on. Do you? And I'm talking to him in the car, saying, do you think these things would have an effect on the West being wealthy and other countries or places not? And he goes quiet for a bit and he shrugs. Oh, maybe a little bit, but no, it still doesn't change. The West stole everything. That's now this is deeply embedded in their thinking. Now, as far as he's concerned, that outside of his immediate family, he has loyalty to nothing. Only your family, your blood, you have loyalty to. Outside of that, whether it be the state, the institutions of the state, other races of people, other these things, then you have no loyalty. In fact, it's almost an obligation you have to lie to these people, to deceive them in order to gain an advantage over them. And they have this very fixed mindset. For example, creating wealth or taking wealth from others, they just assume wealth is a very fixed amount, and you just have to take it if you want more. Therefore, the West is rich. The West can only be rich and must only be rich because it took it, because you can't create new wealth. They just cannot conceive of that. And so when a business negotiation or a contract is being written up, they have no concept of it, of the idea of creating wealth and so on. Now you can state it down to very simple. Okay, you're going to manufacture widgets for us in this place. You're going to manufacture widgets, and you'll make for example, I'll simplify this. You'll make $1 profit for every widget you make. Okay, you got all right. Then you move the widgets from there to there, and that's it. That's your job done. That's your contractual obligation. We are obligated in turn to provide you with the following, A, B, C, D. And they're looking at it. Where's the trick? Where's the trick? We know there's a trick. We know you're trying to fuck us. Now, where is it? Where? And so look, we need to get this done. Let's focus on getting it done. But no. And the East Europeans were interesting like that as well. They took the view that it looks straight out as a deception, straight at you, screwing us, straight at you, trying to cheat us. So the best form of defense is attack. So we attack, and we just accuse you of the most horrendous and heinous crimes, and that'll be how we'll negotiate this. And I found this again in other countries, Indonesia and places like that, and so on. They couldn't not do it. And what seemed to make them happy was corruption. They seemed to like, okay, well, why don't we pad this out, and then we'll slip a few bucks in your back pocket, and then you can look after us, and then you can. And so by corruption was a way that they know. But how do we know that this is going to be what we want until we own you? We have to own you. Only if we know we own you can we be sure that we're going to get the outcome we want, and that if we want it changed, you'll do whatever we say because we own you. And this idea of an independent sort of person, group or company or independent person that isn't corrupt and hasn't been corrupted, who they don't own. This seemed to be outside of their thinking as well. So, a merit-based system with no corruption, this too is a Western value. So there are many Western values, inherent in this that became very apparent to me with the business traveling that I was doing and the work that I had to do. And I was in a better position to sort of see that than many others, I guess. But and we can talk about many simple things here. You go to a policeman in a third world country, and they will expect a bribe. If things were in customs that I wanted to get them out in a third world or a corrupt country, if I had to bribe someone to get the stuff out. If they think you're a rich Western white boy, we can hit him up for a bribe. And they'll just say, they'll just say, okay, well, when do you need it? Is it urgent? You need it right now? Okay, all right. Then. Look, we've just discovered a discrepancy in the paperwork. It's going to take 6 months to process your request. 6 months? I need it tomorrow. Oh, well, hey, nothing we can do. Discrepancy in the paperwork. And then I used to use agents for this. I didn't want to do it directly. But an agent who we would pay, we paid the agent a fee. The agent would slip $100 to the customs guy, and then 5 minutes later, 5 minutes later, we've got the stuff. So everything's done by corruption. These are values too, that you can conduct business, you can do a whole lot of things in the West. Less now than it was, but because again, the globalists are destroying the whole structure of trust and merit. But the idea that people would do something because it's their job to do it, and they would do it without fear or favor because those are the rules. Now, in terms of the rule of law, but not only the rule of law as in just a straight legal, in any agreement or again, whether it be processing of importation of goods or anything at all, that there are clear rules. And if the rules aren't exactly clear, there's a clear understanding about what your behavior should be in terms of basic business transactions. For example, you go to a shop and the item's $5 and you give the shop assistant $10, you're going to get the $5 change back. You don't know that in third world countries. Okay, you don't know that. So again, that level of social trust. Now, there are certain countries where, as they perceive it, they have an obligation to screw over the Christian or the white boy, Christian white boy. It is an obligation, almost like a religious obligation to do it. Whereas, in our country, we would, I'm sure there are people that would, but I would never think of doing that. So there are a whole range of values, Western values, and that they all revolve. I think they all revolve around social trust, merit, and rule of law, due legal process, people abiding by the rules and obligations of an agreement, implicit or written, and so on. And these very much are values that that the West has uniquely that you don't see in other places in the world, or see sparingly and rarely. So when it comes to talking about values, these are the things. And again, these are the very things that the globalists are working overtime to destroy. You've been fantastic today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.